Good evening. This is World News. Tonight, the pressure on Iran intensifies. Washington sharpens its options as protests turn deadly, military bases shift posture in the Gulf, and Tehran stages a show of strength even as cracks deepen across the region. Let's begin with Washington, where warnings are no longer rhetorical. The White House is escalating its language and its calculus. Donald Trump has made it clear Iran's crackdown on protesters will not go unanswered. According to security experts, Washington's menu of options is wide and dangerous. From direct military strikes to cyber warfare to disrupting Tehran's grip on information, energy infrastructure, nuclear facilities, even Iran's communications blackout, all are now potential pressure points. Here's the full report.
50 high-value targets, one explosive dossier, and the Trump administration is now holding the so-called strike list on Iran's most powerful security forces. As nationwide anti-regime protests in Iran enter their third week, the US-based nonprofit has delivered a detailed dossier to the White House. The list reportedly identifies 50 key targets linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, and its paramilitary Basij units, the very forces accused of crushing protests with lethal force. At the heart of the list, Tehran's Thorala headquarters, described as the nerve center of the regime's crackdown. Alongside it, 23 regional IRGC Basij bases, 4 sub-headquarters across the capital, and specific security brigades responsible for street-level violence. Human rights groups say over 2,000 protesters have already been killed, yet the demonstrations continue, fueled by anger over economic collapse, corruption, and the demand for regime change. President Trump has signaled impatience, warning the US is locked and loaded and ready to act if killings persist. Analysts note the dossier isn't an official strike plan, but it highlights US options ranging from targeted airstrikes to cyber operations, all aimed at crippling the IRGC's grip on power. Iran has rejected all threats, warning of retaliation against US interests and regional bases. Meanwhile, the world watches as tensions rise and the question looms, will this dossier spark action, or will it become another warning in a rapidly escalating crisis? 50 targets, one list, and a country on the edge. Stay tuned because this story is far from over.
In a quiet but telling move, the United States has begun adjusting its military posture in the region. Personnel at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, one of the Washington's most critical forward installations, have been advised to leave. Officials insist this is not an evacuation. They call it a precaution, a response to rising regional volatility. Sample this.
The United States is quietly pulling people out of its largest military base in the Middle East. No official announcement, no press conference, just a sudden warning to evacuate and a region already on edge. Multiple diplomatic sources confirm that U.S. personnel at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar have been advised to leave by Wednesday evening. Al Udeid is home to around 10,000 American troops and serves as the nerve center for U.S. military operations across the Middle East. Officials insist this is a posture change, not a full evacuation, but the timing tells a different story. Al Udeid isn't just another base. It houses key command operations, strategic bombers, and air coordination for missions stretching from Iraq to the Persian Gulf. When movement happens here, it usually signals serious concern behind the scenes. Just hours before the evacuation advisory, Iran warned regional countries that U.S. bases would be targeted if Washington intervenes in Iran. That warning came after President Donald Trump threatened action against Tehran over its violent crackdown on protesters and abruptly cut off negotiations with Iranian officials. Shortly after, the evacuation notice went out. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it is now at the highest level of preparedness. Its aerospace commander claims missile production has surged and that Iran is fully ready to respond to any attack. Tehran has also reportedly severed direct communication channels with Washington, raising fears of miscalculation. This isn't the first time Al Udeid has been cleared ahead of danger. During last year's conflict, the U.S. carried out a partial evacuation before Iran launched missiles at the base in retaliation for U.S. strikes. That precedent is why today's move is setting off alarm bells. So far, U.S. officials are keeping public comments minimal. No confirmation of an imminent strike, no denial either. Just a quiet adjustment and a clear signal that something could be coming. A base that anchors America's military presence in the Middle East is thinning out. Iran is on high alert. Diplomatic channels are shut. For now, this is being called precautionary, but when Al Udeid moves, the world pays attention.
Thousands gather in Tehran, coffins line the streets, and Iran's protest crisis enters a new, emotionally charged phase. The Islamic Republic has held a mass funeral for more than 100 members of its security forces and others officially labeled as martyrs. State television shows crowds waving flags, prayers echoing outside Tehran University. A carefully choreographed spectacle indeed. Here's a report from Iran.
Thousands gather in Tehran, coffins line the streets, and Iran's protest crisis enters another tense chapter. A mass funeral ceremony has begun in Iran's capital, Tehran, for more than 100 members of the security forces and other people the state calls martyrs. The ceremony comes after weeks of nationwide protests that have shaken the Islamic Republic. State television says thousands of mourners attended the event, waving Iranian flags as prayers were read outside Tehran University. Images show large crowds gathered to honor those killed during the unrest. Iranian authorities say the deaths were caused by rioters, claiming dozens of security personnel and civilians were killed. But human rights groups paint a very different picture, saying thousands of protesters may have been killed during a violent crackdown by security forces. The funeral highlights the deep divide over what is happening inside Iran and who is responsible for the bloodshed. As the government honors its dead, families of protesters continue to search for answers. With emotions running high and protests ongoing, Iran remains on edge, and the world is watching closely to see what comes next. Iran's unrest turns deadly in a new and shocking way. An IRGC colonel has been beaten to death by anti-regime protesters, marking a dramatic escalation in the country's rapidly spiraling crisis.
The killing underscores how Iran's streets are no longer just scenes of protest, but battlegrounds of revenge, rage, and collapse of control. The victim, IRGC Colonel Mahdi Rahimi, was reportedly responsible for ordering troops to open fire on protesters in the western town of Malik Shai on January 3rd, killing around 10 people. Survivors later identified his residence. Protesters tracked him down and carried out what activists describe as a retaliatory killing. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi rejected the idea that the unrest constitutes protests at all. Instead, he labeled it a terrorist war, claiming armed groups are targeting police stations, government buildings, and businesses. He says authorities possess audio recordings allegedly ordering militants to fire on civilians and security forces, claims activists strongly dispute. Rights groups paint a grim picture. Activists say at least 544 people have been killed since demonstrations began, with more than 10,600 detained in just 2 weeks. Hospitals across Iran are reportedly overwhelmed, emergency rooms flooded, corridors packed, and morgues full as casualties continue to rise. Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has struck a defiant tone, insisting the Islamic Republic will not back down. Yet protests have grown into the largest demonstrations in years, with crowds chanting "death to the dictator" and torching government buildings in major cities. As unrest surged, authorities imposed a near-total internet shutdown. Monitoring group NetBlocks says Iran went offline for more than 12 hours, a move aimed at suppressing coordination and limiting outside visibility amid fears of hidden massacres. The protests erupted in late December, driven by economic collapse, hyperinflation, a crashing rial, and soaring food and fuel prices. What began as merchant strikes in Tehran's Grand Bazaar quickly spread to all 31 provinces, morphing into open calls for regime change. With protesters openly demanding an end to clerical rule and retaliatory violence now claiming senior security figures, Iran faces one of the gravest challenges in its modern history. The death of an IRGC colonel signals a dangerous turning point, one where fear has shifted sides and the regime's grip is visibly slipping.
Now, behind closed doors, Iran's Arab rivals are delivering a clear message to Washington: do not strike Tehran. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states have reportedly warned the Trump administration against military action, fearing retaliation, instability, and regional blowback. Riyadh has made its position explicit. It will not allow US jets to use Saudi bases to attack Iran. The Gulf's calculation is pragmatic. A weakened Iran may be desirable. A burning region is not.
Is Saudi Arabia playing a double game with Iran? On camera, Riyadh says one thing. Behind closed doors, reports suggest another. As Iran boils from inside and war drums beat louder in Washington, the question is no longer about Iran alone. It is about Saudi Arabia's real intentions. First, the trigger. In recent weeks, US President Donald Trump has issued some of his sharpest warnings yet to Tehran. Threats of very strong action, hints that help is on the way for Iranian protesters. Behind the scenes, the White House has reviewed military options, targeted strikes, cyber operations, and even attacks on facilities linked to Iran's crackdown. No final order has been given, but the military planning is real. Now enter Saudi Arabia. Publicly, Riyadh has drawn a clear line. It has told the United States it will not allow its airspace to be used for any attack on Iran. It has even conveyed the same message directly to Tehran. Saudi officials speak of de-escalation, of regional stability, of not being dragged into another war. But here is the contradiction. Multiple reports claim that Saudi Arabia, along with some regional partners, would quietly welcome a US strike that weakens Iran or even removes Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. On the surface, it looks like a double game. Public neutrality, private hostility. To understand this, you have to go back. The Iran-Saudi rivalry is decades old, rooted in sectarian divide, Shia Iran versus Sunni Saudi Arabia. It exploded after Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution, when Tehran promised to export its revolution across the Muslim world. Since then, they have fought shadow wars in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon, and in Iraq. Never directly, always through proxies. But today, the calculus has changed. A full U.S. attack on Iran now could set the entire Middle East on fire. Iran has vowed to strike U.S. bases, Israel, and Gulf states. The Strait of Hormuz, a fifth of the world's oil supply, could shut down. Oil prices could skyrocket, missiles could fly over Riyadh and Dubai, and proxy wars could turn into direct ones. And this is where China and Russia come in. China has already positioned itself as a power broker. It helped restore diplomatic ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Russia sees Iran as a strategic partner in Syria, in energy, and against Western influence. A U.S. strike on Iran would push both Beijing and Moscow closer to Tehran, diplomatically, economically, and possibly militarily. So is Saudi Arabia playing a double game? The answer is not exactly. Saudi wants a weaker Iran, not a collapsed one. It wants Tehran contained, not a regional explosion it cannot control. What looks like duplicity is actually survival strategy. In today's Middle East, silence is policy, and caution is power.
So, tonight, Iran stands at the center of a tightening geopolitical vise. Washington signals strength, the Gulf braces for fallout, and Tehran, under pressure at home and abroad, projects resolve. We will keep tracking every development. That's world news for you.